Ordinarily, I start with my stump speech about the issues I see that are important, which, just so you know, are affordable housing and public education. But since I understand that this has more of an orientation toward the comprehensive plan, let me just speak to that for a few minutes and take questions. The mayor sent down this bill, as I think you all know, in January. It's to amend or rewrite the framework. I believe that her intent in what she sent was to try to affect the litigation that's going on right now with regard to a number of PUDs across the city, and also to preclude any further litigation regarding planned unit developments. Not, in my view, a very good motive for sending down this amendment. Further, all she did, even though the Office of Planning had promised that they were a year ago going to send down the entire document, they only sent down the framework. But if you look at it carefully, it's worded in such a way that it, in effect, rewrites the land use element, which she did not send down. Now, my reaction was to have a meeting with a number of stakeholders, a few of whom are in the room, to talk about what was going on and what could happen. And I scheduled a hearing, a public hearing, which, if I remember correctly, and it's been a very long spring for various reasons, was in March. But it was something like 6 or 8 weeks to give plenty of time for community activists to organize, which is exactly what happened, because there were about 270 witnesses. Now, I've got to tell you that there were some folks who said no, that the bill should be sent back. I'm not going to name anybody, but there were some folks who said, no, you send the bill back. Well, if you understand the legislative process, that's not possible. And actually, if you think about the legislative process, because the document is before us, and it's only before us because the mayor introduced it. We cannot on our own initiate amendments to the comprehensive plan. We actually have control over that document and amendments to the comprehensive plan right now.
Right.
Or more specifically, as chair of the committee that has that document, I have some control over that, and I intend fully to exercise it. So rather than send it back, no, why not rewrite her proposals for the framework in a way that's acceptable? Now, having said that, it's clear to me from the testimony that there are several problems with what was sent down. One of them is that it makes the plan more vague and therefore less meaningful. And any of you who know my history, I got arrested over the comprehensive plan 30 years ago, and and it was in part because the plan was too vague and it needed to be more specific. We were trying to use some provisions in the comprehensive plan with regard to some development that we thought was incompatible, and we lost in court because the plan was vague. And so I get it that it needs to be specific, and if you think about it, for a plan to be meaningful, it's got a plan. It can't just be some vague document. Any of you who have been around for the longest of time, you'll remember that the earliest land use map was what people called the Matisse map, because it was just blobs of pastel colors. That's not useful. So that's one thing that was clear. I knew before the hearing, but was clear at the hearing, was that actually there were folks on all sides of the issue who felt, don't make it more general. And second of all, that the document says nothing about housing, or actually very little. I think there's a sentence. And it needs to say much more, because housing is a priority in this city, and affordable housing is especially a priority. And we ought to speak to that in the planning document to say that this is the goal of the city, that we want to see more housing and we want to see more affordable housing. There's another provision in there that in essence says, and I'm going to oversimplify this, well, it doesn't really matter what the document says. If the zoning commission says it means this, then that's what goes. And that's not very good either. It goes back to my first point that the plan needs to be somewhat specific. The hearing was, I think, helpful. And in fact, it helped a lot of folks who are in this room to organize. It also made it clear to the mayor that the document was not acceptable. And as I said,
right,
there were folks on all sides of the issue who had complaints about the plan. So as I said, the hearing was really helpful, and we are going to turn to that over the summer so that we can come out with a better document, and I will be consulting with a lot of different people so that we get consensus to get a document through. So that's kind of what I wanted to lay out instead of my usual campaign stump speech with regard to the plan, because I think that's the primary interest of folks here, and happy to take questions. Thank you.